Karen was in a very bad point in her life. The family was in a very bad point. Karen was in a very bad point. And there was many conversations, it's probably more with Philip and Chip, about what we could do. There was nothing else they felt they could do in Chicago. Chip reached out to the JDRF at that point. They knew that this was the right thing to do. As it turned out, it was definitely the right thing to do. And we're so happy that they had that, and that Chip was able to have that resource through the JDRF to put their child back on track.
Dad went to the network when Karen was particularly sick in her teenage years to go and seek out some extra help. It was really a struggle for him and for my mom and for our entire family, because we had gotten to a point where we knew we could no longer deal with all of this on our own. And it taught me that it's okay to put your pride aside when you need help and go to your resources and look outside the box and fight for what you care most about.
Chip and Patty were just beyond themselves worried about her, and he asked if I had any suggestions. I put the call out to my list, and luckily a friend of mine on the list who was a pediatric endo knew about Cumberland Hospital in Virginia, and so that's how I was able to get that information to Chip and get some help for Karen.
At Cumberland, we look at both the medical side of the problem and the emotional side of the problem. And in Karen's case, both were important aspects of her recovery and her wellness. It's important to realize that diabetes has an impact on a person's emotions. There can be a great deal of process toward acceptance of having diabetes, of all the challenges that diabetes presents. There are a lot of aspects of having diabetes that are quite difficult. The fear of the fact that your body's not under your control any longer, the anger at feeling different from other people, at having to do tasks all the time, some of them painful, which people often react against. The fear that something might happen to you, that you might have a seizure, or that you might wind up in the hospital inadvertently. And all of those aspects of having diabetes, all the anger and fear and denial and depression, can affect the family members as well as the patient.
I think that depression isn't an often talked about subject when we're talking about diabetes. I think there are a lot of people out there, I know there are a lot of people out there with diabetes who also suffer from depression. And if you are at all prone to depression, having a chronic disease certainly makes it worse. And especially a disease like type 1, I don't think a lot of people understand that there really is no such thing as a break. There's not a 10-minute break in the day when you're ever free of type 1. There's no such thing as remission ever. So when you're dealing with that kind of an onslaught all the time, it's easy for me to imagine, and I've dealt with it myself, it's easy for me to imagine that one could get depressed, and it's not a subject that people are really willing to necessarily talk about.
I remember the Halverson family quite well. Both parents and Karen came to the hospital, and as most of our patients are when they arrive, were in serious turmoil, but had a very positive attitude that things could improve, they could get better. Parents who participate in the care actively, those are the patients who do the best. Sometimes we have parents who just want to sort of drop the child off for us to work with the child, but they don't feel like they need to take an active role. And I think committed parents understand that they have a role to play in the child's recovery.
When I was honored and Karen gave her speech at the Fund to Cure portion of the night, she just brought the house down. Her speech was phenomenal. I did not know beforehand what she was going to say. And when she got up there, she just spoke from the heart. Her speech was raw, it was sad, it was scary, it was honest, and ultimately it was so inspiring. And all this from a 17-year-old who was dealing with so much. And she just absolutely brought the house down. And people to this day still talk about her speech and how they were impacted by it. When you see a loved one, and especially in this case, a daughter, with such a challenge that she never gets a break from, I can certainly understand why Chip just won't give up until we find a cure. It just boils down to love, and he loves his daughter so much. He'll never give up until he finds a cure for her.